Hello friends, this is Mike Thompson. It's good to see you today. I hope you have a great day. I know I'm going to have a good day. You know why? Because this is the day the Lord's made. And I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. It doesn't matter what happens today. It simply does not matter. I believe God's in control. And God knows this day before this day ever begun. We're going to look at Jesus right now. And we're going to study Matthew chapter 18. And listen to the words starting with verse number 1. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted, and become as a little child, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. All right. So the disciples are talking about who's the greatest in heaven, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. That's typical. You get a bunch of men together and talking about who can shoot the longest hoop, who could run the longest 100-yard dash. They want to know who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Well, just so happens we got Jesus over here. Let's go find out. So they go to Christ and they said, hey, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Well, Jesus sees a small child and he goes and gets that small child and he sets that small child down. And Jesus says, except you be converted and become as a small child, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Before Jesus is going to talk about who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, he's going to first talk about how to get into the kingdom of heaven. And look at that one word. It says converted. Except you be converted as a small child. In other words, we have to change to be like a child to get into heaven. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm a grown man. When I surrendered my life to Christ, I was a grown man. And he said that, listen, you got to be converted as a child. You have to change. As a man, I had a job. I had a career. I had control of my life. I did what I wanted to do. I had, if you would say, I had the bull by the horns, and I was moving forward in my life. And then came Jesus. And Jesus told me I was a sinner, and I was. He told me that I was lost, and I was. He told me that I needed to be saved, and I did. That to be saved, or to get to heaven, I had to be like a child. I had to go back and humble myself to God and confess that I was a sinner and surrender my life. Instead of taking charge of my life, I had to give God my life. And then instead of saying, I rule my life, I had to say, God, will you rule my life? So I had to be converted. So before Jesus was going to say who's going to be the greatest, he says, let's talk about who's going to get into heaven. So my friends, I'm hoping that you've been converted as a small child and you see your need or your dependency that needs to fall upon God, because we cannot get to heaven ourselves. And as you see this old gray hair on my face and this gray beard and the wrinkles around my eyes, I'm getting older. And one of these days I won't be here. So I better prepare for eternity. And you better prepare too, because you never know when your last day will be. So Jesus says how to get into heaven. Then he says, okay, you want to know who's the greatest? That's how you get into heaven. But he says, whosoever shall humble himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. In this world, we throw our chest back and we demand and we work hard and we fight our way through. And Jesus says, that ain't how it is in heaven. Not at all. It's the humble. It's the meek. Someone told me one time the word meek means to be strength under control. Now, I'm not the biggest guy in the world. I'm definitely not the strongest. I'm definitely not the fastest. But I can pretty much hold my own in this world. But I'm not here to burst myself forward or to thrust myself forward in this world. I'm here to humble myself and say, listen, I'm weak, I'm a sinner, I'm mortal, I'm corruptible, and I need God in my life. And when I surrender myself to God, and I humble myself to God, that makes me great in the kingdom of God. So my friends, you go out there today and you face this world and you be strong in the Lord. Be humble in the Lord, and you will be strong in the kingdom of God. God bless you.